My name is Heidi McIndoe. I am a registered dietitian. And today, normally I do these cooking demos or these demos about how to cook delicious, nutritious foods. But today we're doing a little different spin, and I'm going to help teach you how to grow nutritious and delicious foods that you can then use in other cookings of more delicious foods. So today what we're going to talk about is planting herbs. So herbs are a great way to add flavor to your food. They add variety to your food. You know, you could have the same basic recipe and one day put basil and oregano in it, and another day put rosemary in it, and another day put thyme or dill in it, and it's going to take on 3 different tastes. So you get a lot of variety even from the basics of cooking that way. Now, one of the other things that is so great about herbs is that they have no fat, they have no sodium, and they have no added sugar. So they're a great way, especially if you're trying to watch how much of those nutrients you are taking in. These are a great way to add flavor without adding any of those more negative nutrients, things that we're always trying to be cautious of. They can pack food or flavor in, I should say, and especially the important one is sodium, because I feel like a lot of people feel like when they take sodium or salt away, they lose the flavor. Well, technically, they only lose the salty flavor. There's lots of other flavors that you can add to make food just as delicious without the salt or with less salt. And herbs are one of the things I always recommend people use to do that. So the thing about herbs, yeah, you can buy the little jars in the grocery store. I meant to grab one and I forgot. But those can get expensive. So those dried herbs, I mean, you can easily spend $5, $6, $7 on a little jar of dried herbs. And if you happen to have maybe a very hot kitchen, if you live somewhere where it's very hot, they lose their potency or their flavor somewhat quickly. So you're spending, $6 on this jar of herbs, and maybe halfway through you have to dump it because it doesn't really have that good flavor anymore. The thing with fresh herbs that you grow yourself is they're always available. You can always just go to if you have a nice windowsill, or if you have a nice patio, or somewhere else near a bright, some sunlight, you can just pick off a leaf and you're good to go, or a few leaves. And for much lower cost, they're very budget friendly. So like I said, a little jar of herbs that you're going to have to dump after it, halfway is gone, might be $5, $6. Well, you get a good pricey bag of seeds. We're spending maybe $1.99, maybe $2.50 for a nice bag of seeds. Or I think this pot from the grocery store here was $2.99 or $3.99. So you're already spending less as it is, but these are just going to continue to give you more and more value as you keep them around. So that's why we want to, try and do it ourselves. And it's just fun. It's something I think it's really interesting if I'm cooking to just be able to go and pick something I grew to add flavor to that food. So you do need a few things in terms of supplies if you're going to be planting your herbs. So if you want to start from seed, obviously you need seeds. If you are more comfortable getting a guy that's already started, then you can buy herbs, these small little pots of herbs at the garden center, at a nursery, at the home improvement stores, the grocery store. Lots of places sell these, and we're going to talk about transplanting these. What you also need are some pots, obviously, different size pots. Now the pots I have today, if you can get, I like these pots, the pots with the little holes on the bottom, because when you water plants, you don't want the bottom, if there were no holes in here, the extra water that the plants don't need just sort of puddles up in the bottom, and it can cause the roots to really, sort of get moldy and gross, and it can actually kill the plant if you're overwatering and that water has no way to escape. So look for holes. If you can't find the holes in the pots, or whatever you've chosen to plant in doesn't have holes, what I've done before is find little rocks from the yard to put in there. And what that does, it doesn't let the water escape necessarily, but at least it allows for an area, say you have a layer of rocks like this, and now your soil's starting, it allows for an area for that water to puddle, and the roots and the soil isn't just soaking in it. So I've done that with rocks. If you live somewhere where there's a beach, I've broken up shells and put them in there. If you ever have one of those terracotta pots and maybe you drop it and break it, I've used little pieces of that and put broken pieces of pot in the bottom of the little pots without holes. In bigger pots, something like this, I've actually taken upside down yogurt containers or upside, the little ones, or upside down little fruit cups and put them upside down in here just to allow for more space. The water can sort of pool around the base of that instead of in the soil. The other things you are going to need, you don't need gloves. I like gloves because I don't like getting dirt all into my fingernails, but you can skip the gloves and wash your hands. That's fine. I have a little garden trowel, which I use for digging the dirt. Don't have one? Just use a spoon or use your hands. Either of those will work fine. And then, of course, we need the soil. You do want to get some potting mix. You don't want to just dig up some dirt in your backyard. The dirt in the backyard, you don't know. First of all, you might be, there might be a whole pile of weeds that you're now putting in your pot. There could be little microscopic sort of, I use the word bugs, but it could be bugs, but it could also be some sort of fungus or bacteria that you're now bringing into this pot. And you want, especially because this is something that you're going to have indoors, most likely, or on a patio, and you're going to be eating it, you want it to be nice and clean. You want that soil to be clean. You don't want anything getting into that you wouldn't want to eat. So you want to look for a bag of potting mix. I got this somewhat small bag. I have seen smaller bags, but when I went the other day, everybody was all out. Usually you can find potting soil. I've seen it at Target. You can get it at the home improvement stores like Lowe's and Home Depot, Walmart's Garden Center. If there's a nursery near you, I actually got this bag at the grocery store because I went to 3 other stores and they were all out that day. And luckily the grocery store had like a couple of bags left. And it's usually, if it's especially a grocery store that has like a nice little floral area, that's where you would find it. So those are the things we need. It's not a lot. Oh, you know what I didn't mention yet? I'll get to those later when we get to needing or using those. Oh, and you might want some like saran wrap or plastic wrap, and I will explain that as well. So first thing we're going to start, and you know what, everybody is muted just to allow for no disturbance. But if you have questions, please post them in the chat because I have the chat open and I can see them. So I can answer questions as we go along if they have to do with what I'm doing or anything else about herbs or planting herbs. I will try to answer them to my best ability. So I did actually, it's funny, I wanted to really get 2 different herbs to give you guys examples today, but the only herb that my garden center had left or my nursery had left was basil, and the only pot I could find at the grocery store that day was basil. So we are doing a double duty basil today, but that's fine. Basil's super easy to grow. So the first thing I'm going to do is the seeds. Now when it comes to planting from seed, if you want to start this early, and by early I mean April, May time, then, and if you're living in an environment where the seasons change dramatically with the weather, then you want to start seeds indoors. So basically, until you get to a point where consistently every night the nightly temperature is above 60 degrees, you want to keep seeds indoors so they don't get damaged in a frost or just even in cold weather. They're very, very susceptible to damage when they're little tiny guys. So if, say it's, middle of July and it's 90 degrees out, sure, go ahead and plant it wherever you want. But if we're talking April, May, sometimes even early June, although not so much this year, I don't think, if there's any risk of it being too cold at night, and that is under 60 degrees, plan to keep them indoors until we've passed that point. So anyway, so I got my basil, and I am first going to put some dirt in my pot. And the thing with the potting soil also, not only does it not have bad things in it that we don't want to get into our herbs, it's usually potting soil has some sort of nutrients mixed in, and sometimes it also has something called vermiculite, which are those little white dots of things. And what those do is they actually lighten up the soil a little bit, which is especially good when we're planting seeds, because if you happen to plant your seeds a little too deep, we don't want them deep at all, and I'll go over that. But if you plant them just a little too deep, they may not be strong enough or getting enough of that light coming through to make them start to grow through a really heavy, packed, dense soil. Another reason why you don't want to use the dirt in your backyard. That tends to be very dense. So this potting soil is nice and sort of fluffy. And my plan, I'm at my kitchen table planting things with dirt. My plan was actually to be outside, but we actually have some yard work going on today, and that was not going to be possible. So here I am at my kitchen table with a pile of dirt. So what you want to do, I'm going to move and if you do get the pots with the holes, like I said, I always love to get something under it to catch that extra water. This can be a cereal bowl, it could be a soup bowl, it could be a little plate that you have from the kitchen, or if you were at Lowe's or Home Depot to get the potting soil or the seeds, they sell these kinds of things in all different sizes. So this one I have for that, and this one I have for this. And if you happen to be heavy-handed with the watering, then yeah, look for one that's a little deep like that so it can hold some water and it doesn't spill out, especially if you're keeping it, say, on the living room floor or something, if that's where your window is. And if you do see water pooling up in this for, extended periods of time, I just every now and then I sort of go dump it in the sink just so it's still not sitting under there. So anyway, so you basically want to fill your pot. Hopefully my dirt doesn't fall over. Not all the way. So I put a little too much in there. I'm going to put it back and I will show you in a minute. So if you can see, just about a little ways up from where this little groove is. So you see the groove on the pot. The top of my soil is just about a quarter of the way up that. And I'm going to pack it just a wee bit. Press it down just because if you don't pack it, what happens when you go to water it is it just sort of all starts floating around and it's not stable for the plants and it gets a little soggy. All right, so I have my nicely loosely packed soil like that. And like I said, please, if you have any questions as we're going along, let me know. So now I have my seeds. Now there are more than enough seeds in here for me and everyone I know to get some basil. So what I do, I just like to snip a little bit off, a little tiny bit. And I actually have a piece of paper here because I'm gonna, no, I can't find where I snipped. There we go. The seeds are super, super tiny and I don't want to lose them. So I have a piece of white paper and I'm just going to dump a few out if I can. There we go. Dump a few out. And now I can sort of fold this over and seal it up and use it maybe next year. They will eventually sort of lose their ability to germinate, but if I keep this in like a cool, dry place, I could probably use these seeds again next year if need be. Now I'm going to try and show you. So if you've never planted herbs before, can you guys see how teeny, teeny, tiny those seeds are? So they're very tiny. So what you want to do is basically just sort of sprinkle them. Hard to do with gloves on, so I didn't even use the gloves for the dirt like I said I was going to. I just sort of sprinkle them all around, not really being that particular, but I don't want all of them in one big pile. So I try and sprinkle them around. And now what I'm going to do is just get a teeny, teeny, tiny bit of dirt, just a little bit, just to sort of sprinkle. Just what this is going to then pat it down lightly. What that's going to do is that's going to help hold those seeds a little bit in place. But you notice it was a really thin layer of dirt because we do want the sun to be able to shine down and get through a little bit of that loose dirt, because it's the sun that's going to help those seeds germinate, give the nutrients that the leaves need to sprout up through the dirt. So that was pretty darn easy. That's basically how you plant seeds. Now, you want to make sure this stays in a nice sunny place. Doesn't get too cold, doesn't get super, super hot, like I wouldn't store it near my oven. And you want to keep it moist, but not soaking wet. So what I tend to do, instead of using a watering can or a glass of water, I love to use a little mister. So you just have an empty sprayer, and oops, and of course it's on squirt right now. So turn it, there we go. Turn it to mist, and just every day, just give it a little mist. So I'm not making it soaking wet. I'm just putting enough moisture in here for that to sort of set and give those seeds some water. And now here comes 2 other little tricks you can do. So they are going to grow the best when they are, like I said, kept moist and when they have a little bit of warmth to them. Think of them, well, what I like to think of this is like a little incubator, basically, for the seeds, or a little mini greenhouse. So you can easily take, got 2 options here. So you can take just a piece of plastic wrap, pop it right over the top. Okay, they don't need oxygen really that much, like to this extent. We're going to open it once they start growing. And you're not sealing it super tight. There's a little air hole there. But basically, you want to hold in that heat and that moisture. So you're going to put a cover like that. The other option I like, which is really fun, and I think it's easier than this because, how hard is it to then put saran wrap back on after you keep lifting it off to add the moisture? If you happen to have a water bottle or any kind of plastic bottle, I cut the top off, actually, and you can set it right there, just over I'm going to come in close again. I set it right over the middle where my seeds are, and now I have this little greenhouse. So it's going to keep the heat in. When this is in a sunny spot and it gets to that moisture that's inside from my misting, it's going to create a little greenhouse effect, very warm, moist air, which is what we need. Now, when I go to water, instead of dealing with my plastic wrap, which will work fine, I just take this off, I mist, and I put it back. So that is our basil. Now, this is great. I planted basil today, but what if I planted like 5 different herbs? How am I going to know what's what? A few different things you can do. So you can get popsicle sticks. You can go on Amazon or the garden center and buy all kinds of fancy labels, and that's fine. You can write on your pot if you want. But what I sometimes like doing is I take a little plastic knife and I just write basil on it, and I stick it right here facing out so I can see it, I guess. So now I know that in this pot I have basil. Once it starts growing, you can usually tell most herbs apart from each other because they do look different. The other option is, say you emptied your bag of seeds, you can cut the whole bottom off, stick a plastic spoon in it, or actually I guess what I would want to do is once it's empty, I'd probably cut the bottom off, stick the spoon in it, and now I can stick my spoon in here and I always know what this is as well as have some instructions. So that's a good one too. So this is what you're going to do with your herbs. You're going to just keep misting it, keep it moist. And once it gets about, say, 3 to 6 inches tall, so almost like a, basically as tall as this or somewhere between, here and here, that's when we're going to move it to a bigger pot. So when we move it to a bigger pot, so we're going to set this guy aside, put his base on there, get him out of our way. Now, he's probably not going to look like this when you start moving him to a bigger pot, but we're going to use this guy anyways. So we have our pot. Now I'm going to put my gloves on again. All right. So we take our pot, just like oops, look at that. My little greenhouse fell over because I knocked it with my, move him out of the way. There we go. So we get our dirt. And this time we're only gonna fill it maybe halfway or so. So if you can you guys see in here all those little white flecks in the soil? That's the vermiculite I was talking about. It's just something that lightens up the soil a bit so it's not too dense on the seeds and the seedlings. So I put a little too much in here. Right. So what I like to do is, like I said, I fill it about halfway. And then I sort of make a little, almost like a little hole in the center, not all the way to the bottom, but I just sort of mush it around so that, I know it's hard to see with the camera and with the dark dirt, but there's sort of a ridge around the outside and the center is a little bit more shallow. All right, so now we gotta get this guy out of here. So I always sort of gently squeeze it to loosen things up. And then all you gotta do, they're pretty hardy. So you're gonna grab the plant and sort of as you're flipping it, your hand's gonna catch the plant and hold the plant. You just keep squeezing this and it's gonna come out. Now all these white things, those are just the roots of the plant. And this plant's actually doing pretty good. It really didn't need to be transplanted yet. The more this fills up with roots, the more closer it is that, oh, I really needed to transplant, because once the roots can't grow any further, the plant can't grow much. So you want to make sure the roots always have room. Now we're just going to basically put that in that nice little hole that we made. And now fill all those edges with dirt. And again, we're going to pack this. We can pack a little bit more than we packed our seeds because now we have plants and we want them to be nice and stable. So you know what? I'll probably move this thing here. So we want them to be able to stand up strong here. So all that hole that you had on the sides, we're basically filling up. So as I've said, I'm at my kitchen table. I highly recommend doing this outside. Just way easier and neater, but you know, do what we gotta do. So I am going around. Now you can still label this if you're someone who's not that familiar what different herbs look like or smell like. You can use the same little plastic knives or plastic spoons or popsicle sticks or whatever you can find to label it. So and now I'm going in and I'm pressing the earth, or the soil, I should say, that the basil itself came with, just to make sure everything is nice and secure. Now, if you wanted to, at nurseries and greenhouses, they sell different products that sort of help the roots be healthier. If you wanted, you could sprinkle some of that in before you put this part of the plant in. I would still fill the pot that halfway, make that hole, and then put the root builder at the bottom. You don't have to, but you can. So we're going to fill it, and again, we want this to be moist. Now this can handle some more heavy-duty watering, but if you've got the mister, then go ahead and just mist it, and that works. That works fine to get some soil in there, especially after you've just transplanted it. So this transplanting, it's sort of like a big shock. So you want to make sure it has that water, and then you get it exposed to some light. And that is basically how we plant and transplant herbs. So now we have this nice little pot. We'll put it in our drip tray there. Now the thing is, when you go to use the basil, what you want to try and do, you don't want to let it get huge and huge, because then it gets, they call it like woody, and it just, you get these big long stalks. You want to try and pinch off what you want. And I try and find like not the tip top to pinch from, but maybe the second layer. And you can just pinch that off. And now at that spot where you pinched, you should get 2 more leaves sprouting out. So that's how you keep it nice and full, by finding a lower, bigger leaf, not these teeny tiny ones at the bottom. I mean, you can certainly pinch from the top, but now you're going to be growing more at the top, and it's going to get, sort of heavy, and the bottoms, the stems won't have anything. So I look for the lower leaves on the stems, pick them off, and that's how it ends up keeping the plant nice and healthy. And then you can just trim them up, put them in your food, do whatever you want. So are there any questions? Hold on, I see a question. So let me see if I can read it. Do you have any advice for an apartment gardener who might not have access to great sunlight? So in my house, I have a house and I don't have access to great sunlight, only because my windows have very narrow windowsills. If you can find, what I've done before is I have a sliding glass door, and literally the plants are set up in front of it, which makes getting in and out challenging. If you happen to have some nice window, maybe you can get a TV tray or something that you can put in front of the window. And I know some people also, if you can do the TV tray thing, end up moving the plant. If you have such limited sunlight, say in the morning it comes in this window for a couple hours, have the TV tray with the plants there. And then maybe in the afternoon you get a couple hours somewhere else, move it. But that's, if you can hang it, sometimes that's good too. If you do have a nice window that doesn't have a place for you to put something in front of, they sell, the hooks that you could just put this in a nice pot with the straps that come around it and hang it on a hook. And that might be somewhere where you could put it to get some sunlight as well. I'm always jealous of those people that have the nice big windowsills in the kitchen where all the sun comes in and they have all their herbs. I don't have that. So I hope that was helpful. Any other questions about the herbs or anything planting? What herbs grow well outside? Should a basil plant be able to live year round, or do you need to replant? So any herb can grow outside. I currently have outside, I have chives both inside and outside. I have oregano outside. I have mint outside, and I have chocolate mint outside. Not that I even know what to do with chocolate mint. I just really liked the way it smelled and it looked. And the basil can be inside or outside. I will say things like mint and oregano, especially if you're putting them in the ground, they spread. So what I've done with mine is I actually took a pot and I planted the pot so they can't spread beyond their little area, and they're doing very, very well. And as far as basil, it depends. I know people who have had the same basil plant and they pick off the leaves and it lasts for a long time. I know other people who, every few months they have to buy another one. And I think that's, some people have a greener thumb than others. It should be able to live year round. And one thing you can do, so like I said, I have chives outside, I have chives inside, but the indoor chives, I do tend to put out in the patio in the summer. So if you have an area where you can put pots, put them outside all summer, and then bring them inside just for the winter to make them last longer, and have them accessible over the winter, that's something that you can do as well. Any other questions? Oh, somebody just said they think basil is an annual. And I think it might technically be an annual, which means you have to replant it every year. But like I said, I know people that have they got the same basil plant, they just pick it off. So, and I guess I don't know. I know in my area with annuals, once it gets colder, they die off. But if you're keeping it indoors, I'm not sure how that affects it being an annual versus perennial. Somebody else may know that, but like I said, I know people that just keep the same basil plant all the time. I guess, so yeah, don't feel bad if it does die, because maybe it's meant to. But the good thing is, I would still, you could still buy a basil plant for, what did I say? This was like $3.99, and at least enjoy it. If you buy it at the store in, say, April, you could certainly enjoy it through to, I'd say, October maybe, and have that fresh basil. And we're going to have a segment in a couple of weeks about preserving herbs. So once you've planted them and you have a whole bunch, we'll tell you how to make them last longer. So thank you very much. I hope you guys learned, oh, can I replant inside the herbs that have been growing outside in bigger pots? I think so. I mean, it depends on how big the pot are. I wouldn't necessarily put them in smaller pots unless you broke off chunks of them. They're going to need that space. But if you broke off a bit of something and then put it in a smaller pot, that should work fine. And I think my outside yard work has gotten very close to my window, so it's getting very loud. I hope you guys can't hear it. But yeah, you should be able to bring outside pots in. Can you root herbs from clippings? I've never tried rooting herbs from clippings. I've seen other people, or I've heard other people talk about it, and I think I've seen it on Pinterest, but I have never done it myself. I say it's worth a try. You know, just take a little clipping off, and I've seen people put it in both soil and in water and have it root. But what does it hurt to try? So thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great day, and I hope somebody tries to plant something. Bye-bye.